Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be my review of this knife, and this is the Civivi Starflare. So Civivi sent this knife for review, and it's one that is kind of different for Civivi, and so I was really interested in checking it out, and particularly because of this really big, really pointy Wharncliffe blade. So Wharncliffes have become more common on modern knives, but they are often kind of modified Wharncliffes. This is just a straight up classic Wharncliffe. Now, there is a little bit of a difference in the fact that the edge angles upward instead of straight out from the handle, but really in all respects other than that, this is a true traditional Wharncliffe. It has a straight edge, no curve to it or anything like that, and it has a continuously curved spine from the tip towards the handle. Whereas a lot of modern Wharncliffes have some sort of, modification of the spine. For example, this is a modified Wharncliffe from Axial Knives. You can see it's got some corners on the spine there, and things like that are common amongst modern Wharncliffe knives. So I was excited to see a traditional Wharncliffe. If you follow my channel, you know that I am a fan of traditional knives, and so seeing this on a Civivi, this Wharncliffe, was exciting. Now, that's not to say that it's the first time that they've done a traditional Wharncliffe, but this is a pretty big Wharncliffe blade. Wharncliffes, especially on modern knives, tend to be on the smaller side. So it's a blade shape that lends itself well to a smaller blade where you're using it for, cutting cardboard, opening boxes, and things like that, where you don't need that much edge. You just need the first maybe inch or two to use like a fancy box cutter. Not so on this. The blade on this is 3.3 inches, which is not a massive blade. I used to say that I preferred knives in the 3.5 or really even 3.75 to 4-inch blade length range, and I still do like knives in that range, but I think I'm coming into liking more knives in the kind of 3.25 to 3.75 inch range. So this sits, right in the lower end of that range, and I think it's a nice size knife, especially being a Wharncliffe. And then the other interesting thing about this knife is this handle. It's a really interesting looking handle. First of all, there's several different colors available. There's a black, a gray, this green, and a red. And I requested this green because it's just such a bright green. I really like to have color in my knives. There's so many knives out there that are either black or tan or olive green or OD green, and then titanium, basically gray. And so the fact that Civivi is doing these knives in these really bright, vibrant colors, I really love. They've done some, recently some pink knives, the Baby Banter in pink and blue. They did the Cubit in pink, some really nice blue colors on their aluminum knives. So I was excited to see this really kind of vibrant green. It's not super light green. It's not super neon or anything like that, but just a really nice green color. Kind of reminds me of like very fresh spring grass, something like that. So I like the color a lot, and I like aluminum handles a lot. Sometimes people kind of are anti-aluminum handles, but I like them. It's metal, so it's going to be durable. They are lightweight. They can be anodized, nice colors like this, and it gives you a little bit of grip too. It's kind of a matte finish to this. But as you can see, that's not all with the handle and blade on this knife. It's called the Starflare, and you can kind of see that theme played out here. So it's got these almost like meteorites or asteroid looking things, maybe more towards meteorites, shooting across the handle, and it just gives it a little bit of a flare, pun intended, to have a kind of unique look. And I really like how this line on the handle continues really seamlessly onto the blade. That's something that you see on higher end knives, and particularly on like art knives, some really fancy, really high end knives that are made just to look really nice and be kind of collector art pieces. And so it's cool to see that on a, relatively inexpensive Civivi knife. Speaking of which, the different versions, particularly the Damascus and red-handled version, is a little bit more expensive, towards $100, but these are about $70. So, you're getting a knife well under $100 that I'm not saying is like an art knife, but it has kind of a feel of the attention to detail put into it like that, with this, line that extends onto the blade. Now, another thing that Civivi mentions in their kind of marketing on this knife is that it looks like a woodpecker, kind of pointing to this pivot collar here and how it kind of mimics the coloring of a woodpecker's head, and then the blade, it mimics the long beak of a woodpecker. I gotta say, I don't see it a whole lot, but I wanted to mention it mostly because, interestingly, my wife has said for years that a lot of knives look like birds. They have just kind of like a birdish look, I guess. And so, maybe Civivi is seeing the same type thing on this knife. I don't see that a whole lot, but maybe it's there. This has the classic Civivi pocket clip, so it sits nice and deep within your pocket. You won't, have much of it sticking out. And it has beautiful action. Civivi really has their button locks dialed in. I recently saw somebody on Reddit, I think they're a dealer of Civivi actually, claiming that they often get Civivi button locks that don't work. I've had a good number of Civivi knives and even specifically button locks. And I had one knife that the detent on the button lock felt a little bit light. I think it was called the Conspirator. But that's out of, a good number of them. The vast majority of them, this one included, feel so nicely dialed in. I actually, when I got this knife and Sencut knife that I am reviewing also, I sent a message to Civivi like, I know I've told you guys this, but man, your knives are so consistent. And I think if you've had Civivi knives, you really know what I'm talking about. It is so smooth. It is so easy to open. It locks up so securely, even when unlocked. There's no side-to-side play, and it is just drop close smooth. I really feel that they have these button locks dialed in to a T. I mean, at least the ones that I get, I don't know. I don't really feel like they're going through and handpicking the ones that they send to me, and certainly they're not handpicking the ones that I buy, because I've bought, several button lock knives from Civivi and Sencut that have been really nicely done. But man, are they dialed in. I think it's one of those things, honestly. I got this knife and the Sencut knife in close proximity to getting a really high-end, really high-end for me, a $500 American-made knife. And boy, the contrast and the smoothness out of the box, the ease of use, the centering being perfect, pretty much always on Civivi and Sencut knives. It really gave me pause about the, spending over 5 times as much as this knife costs on, the American-made knife, when, I don't know, it's just, maybe it's a different feel. Maybe I just don't, my tastes are not fine enough or something, but I just am so impressed with the quality of these Civivi knives, and it's very true on this knife. Speaking of which, Civivi does a great job of their grinds, and in comparison to, a lot of other knives, and I think it's something people maybe don't talk about enough. I think that their knives are really ground to cut, and particularly a Wharncliffe like this. This knife cuts like crazy. It's something that you can actually use this for some push cutting, like if you were doing food prep, because of that upturn of the edge. You can get the whole edge down if you use a pinch grip. But it's definitely great for opening boxes and things like that. But it's just really nicely done. And really the big thing that surprised me about this knife were the acoustics. Now that's something that you hear talked about more, I would say, on, again, high-end knives, particularly on the brand that I'm kind of referring to, which is Chris Reeve Knives, and on slip joints. So you hear walk and talk on slip joints. This knife has really, really nice acoustics. So hopefully I can get it so you hear it. So it just has a really nice, crisp, kind of clear, almost like silver-like ting when you open it. I think you could probably hear it on that one. It's so nice sounding to me. And even when you close it and it sits into the, back into the button lock, kind of a little bit harder of a ting on close, but man, that is so nice sounding to me. I'm sure there's people out there that are like, what are you talking about? Who cares? But to me, that really adds some enjoyment to the knife. And really, it's super ergonomic. You can pinch up on this blade. You can get a pinch grip that's really comfortable. Just a normal hammer grip is comfortable for me. It's kind of a unique looking knife with this handle shape and the really long Wharncliffe blade, but I think it is a very practical knife, and it is a super well made knife. And it's a knife that, interestingly, I mentioned that I tend to like larger modern knives. Interestingly, I think this knife would do well as a smaller version. So if they did a Starflare Mini, I think that this knife could be, maybe a 2.5-inch blade. So it's legal in even more places, and would still have great ergonomics because of the handle shape, the nice simple handle shape. You'd still get a good amount of usable edge with a 2.5-inch blade, especially being a Wharncliffe and what you tend to use those for. So I'd love to see a smaller version of this Civivi Starflare. I don't know if that's something that other people are interested in, and it's unusual for me, but I do think that this knife would fit well, would be a good fit for a smaller version. So I've really enjoyed getting to check out this knife. I'm super impressed by Civivi's quality every time. And if you are looking for a nice size knife with a Wharncliffe blade and some nice features, the Starflare might be a good option for you. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. Check out my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And make sure you subscribe to my email list there so you know when I post new articles. I'm going to be trying to move towards using that more and social media less. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.